Happy 4th of July, which may, by rumor, be our last. Don't know why. Yeah, I have an idea. Agenda 21, because this 4th of July to be our very last. The next time that we all experience the fullness of our liberation will be with the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. When Jesus Christ comes to rule with us for 1,000 years. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I think it's also a Catholic interpretation as well. Yeah. The Immaculate Heart of Mary comes to rule for the era of peace. Then the Protestants say Jesus Christ comes to rule with us as rulers for 1,000 years. It must be the same Immaculate Heart of Mary triumph that rules in her era of peace. So when we go through this great tribulation, I'm not looking forward to it. It's probably through Agenda 21. The European Union is the 8th king, which means that Pope Francis is not the 8th king. No. That's a mistake. He's not the 8th king. Because he's not even a priest. He's a lay leader, so he's not one of the priest kings. There were 7 priest kings. They were anti-popes, all of them anti-popes, but they were priests. So they were priest kings since 1929. Okay? They were anti-pope priest kings since 1929. And the 8th king is not Pope Francis. The 8th king is the European Union. It makes perfect sense. It goes hand in hand with Scripture and also with Nostradamus, the prophecies of Nostradamus. Nostradamus prophecies are given to us by a Saint Malachi or something. And he calls, and I think Our Lady called him, and Father Malachi called him Father Francis. Not Pope Francis, Father Francis. Aren't they one and the same thing? I don't know. They have like different words to explain paternity. It seems like it would be the same thing, but they are distinguished somehow. What's the difference between a pope and a father? I don't know. Seems to me, the same kind of lingo, pretty much, but different. Lord of the World, which is written, I think, by St. Malachi, but not sure. Some Nostradamus wrote the book, Lord of the Rings. Not Lord of the Rings, Lord of the World, in which they describe all the popes for a very long period of time, right up until the present pope. So that either this person who made these prophecies, whoever he is, got it right, seeing down through the future, or the popes have been following this book like a roadmap and named each pope predictably the way they were instructed, placing that much clout, placing a lot of clout on the Nostradamus predictions, and then deciding in perfect obedience to call themselves after the um, names given over a long period of time. And they nailed it to the T, to the T. Even to the point where Pope Francis is a proudly professed anti-pope and does not want to be referred to as pope, and has, basically considers himself a lay leader, and, told people to consider him the Bishop of Rome, and, neglect or reject, some of these authoritative symbols that would set him apart as Pope. Bishop of Rome is a different title than Pope. So, yeah, he is referred to as Father Francis. And then somebody else refers to him as, what was it again? Oh, God, now I don't have it. Hold on, let me get my thinking cap. I'll get back to you. Hold on. That's what it was. Petros Romanos. Petros Romanos was born in Italy, or Rome or Italy. Probably Rome is in Italy, so why not? Anyways, Italy. Okay, and most people don't realize that Pope Francis was born in Italy. And he and his parents moved to Argentina, somewhere around there, probably Argentina, because that's where he was bishop for a long time. But so they moved to that area in South America and raised their son there. Okay? But that's not where he was born. He was born in Italy. And he had some experience in Italy before he moved with his parents to Argentina or that area. So when he was transferred back to Italy as Bishop of Rome, well, I guess it was like getting back on a bicycle. So he felt very at home. Anyway, if he is Petros Romanos, he's not the bad guy. He's a placeholder. Petros Romanos is not a bad person. So there's a big mistake where Pope Francis is concerned. Yeah, I think what's going on toward Pope Francis is that is unforgiveness, and maybe he was a bad guy, but he's not anymore. Or certainly doesn't appear to be. He seems to be a very kind-hearted, charismatic, good soul. He seems that way. And I don't know if the Nostradamus predictions make room for, and it seems that way. They didn't say that, did they? I mean, there seems to be some conflict here about how we're supposed to interpret Pope Francis in the prophetic history. What is his place in prophetic history? How does the prediction of Nostradamus and apocalyptic prophecy describe Pope Francis? Because although, you know what, the ITCCS says that he was supposed to reside over the Ninth Circle child sacrifice cult in Geneva more recently, and they attempted to physically arrest him. But just because the Pope is somehow made to witness or reside over a Ninth Circle occult sacrifice of a human being doesn't mean that the Pope has the same intentions. And I call him the Pope. He's an anti-Pope because he's a placeholder for the Pope, for the papal office, but he doesn't really want the same, recognition as the other popes. He's a placeholder. And all the popes should have recognized themselves as a placeholder for Christ. It's only Jesus Christ that has the right to that office. Right from St. Peter. Jesus Christ, said, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it." That doesn't mean the gates of hell wouldn't try. The gates of hell will not prevail against it. And then, in the next breath, almost in the next breath, Jesus Christ is saying to St. Peter, "Get ye behind me, Satan." So, and then St. Peter was crucified upside down. Upon request, St. Peter requested to be crucified upside down. So an upside down cross is not necessarily a satanic symbol. It could be a symbol of St. Peter's disposition. So the office of the Pope is a placeholder for Christ. And that's all that should be understood by the term Vicar of Christ, a placeholder for Christ on earth. Not a replacement for Jesus Christ, but a placeholder for Christ until he comes again in glory. Anyhow, so this Bishop of Rome, Father Francis, may be required to reside over the Ninth Circle satanic occult, child sacrifice. He may be bullied into it. He may be going along with it to try to put a stop to it. He was given an opportunity to defend himself in 2014 and decided not to even recognize it. Now, he's done that before. That when he is confronted with something, he'll just ignore it. That's his way of handling it. And sometimes that is policy, especially for church people, that when you're being confronted or accused, maybe they think they're being like Christ. We'll just give the silent treatment. If you're being unjustly accused of something, to just answer it with dead silence. So he may decide, that he's like Jesus Christ by refusing to answer for himself. It's misguided because he's not Jesus Christ. None of us are Jesus Christ. We are required to give an answer for ourselves. So if we're accused of something horrible, it could be human instinct. It could be human instinct. When people are unjust toward us, when they're accusing us of things that are so completely beyond us, we may just go dumbfaced and decide, I'm not going to even bother. I'm not going to speak to this. It could be a human instinct to say, get out of my face, basically. I'm not going to even defend myself. And this is crazy. Believe what you want. Could be an instinct. But by law states, and this is the common law court, that if you refuse to defend yourself, you will be convicted of guilt in absentee. So then, 4 years later, 2018, because they convicted him in absentee when he refused to defend himself, they tried to put the cuffs on him. They put the cuffs on him, allegedly, and then they were illegally bullied, beaten, and let him go. Well, they were required to let him go. They took him away into a getaway car. This is what the internet has been stating. I wasn't there, so I cannot verify whether or not these incidences actually took place. It could be fake news. I don't know whether or not this is true. But what I do know, what I think I know is true, is that there was a prophet from hundreds of years ago that predicted a lineage of popes who would be called under certain titles, and that these popes must have been following these predictions like a road map, because each and every pope that was predicted to come for the time span given took those titles exactly, even to the point where the eighth king supposedly, who is not a priest and therefore cannot be a pope, has rejected the title of pope and has confirmed that he is only a placeholder, but is not a placeholder for Christ. He is merging his role in the Vatican with the European Union and is submitting to the will of the European Union. So the eighth king is not this pope. The eighth king is the European Union. Agenda 21. And so it's very conceivable that the European Union has bullied this eighth pope since 1929, which is Father Francis. Father Francis, a placeholder, not for Christ, but for the European Union. Anyhow, he's also referred to as Petros Romanos. And Petros Romanos is a nice guy. He's predicted to be a very nice guy, fatherly, caring, concerned for people. And in that particular prediction, if it's true that he's also Petros Romanos, as well as a repentant sinner, repenting of radical sins, crimes. He's repentant of his radical crimes. And they were war crimes in Argentina. So if perchance he is repentant, he's serving now as Petros Romanos. And he's a nice person. But we don't know, because I don't remember ever hearing that this nice person is simultaneously two-faced and is leading a double life. And so if he is being bullied into residing over the ninth circle child sacrifice cult, then it is not with his full consent, and he may have the intention to try to put a stop to it. Unless, like I said, we may have overlooked something in the prophecies. Perchance this man is Petros Romanos, but is two-faced. And we may have overlooked that very possibility, that there's room to interpret Petros Romanos as two-faced. Now, what the Satanists believe, that is to say the Luciferian cult, what they believe is as above, so as below. That means everything that is right and good in mainstream civil society is considered bad in their covert practices. So that their whole belief system is based on two-facedness and leading a double life. They wholeheartedly believe in leading a double life. Leading a double life is their religion. They believe wholeheartedly in it. That which is right and just and good in mainstream society is evil in their covert society. So if it is wrong to kill people in mainstream society, it is only right to kill people in their covert society, which is literally underground. Now, the church is also said to be in eclipse, and I'm just finding this out, that in Pope John Paul II's time, he who allegedly is born and died on an eclipse marks a time where the church is also considered to be in eclipse. I'm finding that out through the internet. Unless, unbeknownst to me, I was discovering that in 1982. December 30th, 1982, when my soul was torn out of my sleeping body and brought through several choirs through the outer space, face to face with a lunar eclipse as I was pulled toward the eclipse. And then off to the left of it, I burst open like a firework. And I'm telling you this on the 4th of July. That I burst open like a firework into song. So my soul burst open. It did not hurt. But I exploded into song, and it wasn't my vocal cord singing. And the power that came forth from me was much more powerful than any vocal cords could make. And they were powerful soprano. So the lower notes came from a demographically lower place, and there were about at least nine choirs, right, as I was ascending. At least 9 choirs that I was ascending through to get to the summit, what I experienced as my summit, and I exploded into a soprano note. So it went from demographically lower to higher also by musical notes. And then I walked over to, well, because I discovered feet after a little bit, and I climbed an invisible staircase in space and walked over to a light to the left, just a little more. So that's 2 left. And then so I tried to get past through the light, and the light wouldn't have me. So I swore at it, and I walked. It spoke the word hell to my mind, I think, because I swore at it. And then I walked away from it, and I landed back in my body instantly. Didn't even experience the travel. Was instantly back in my body. Hard rock music filled my brain to wake me, and that hard rock music is what I believe is leftover noise that my soul brought home from drawing so close to the lunar eclipse, since the surface of the sun is like a myriad of hard rock bands at a live concert, or a myriad of hard rock bands at a whole bunch of hard rock concerts all at once. That's what I discovered years and years and years and years later, watching NASA, that the surface of the sun is very, very noisy. So I'm assuming that the hard rock music, which filled my brain to wake me, was leftover noise that my soul brought home to wake me up. And I sat up in my bed, and I looked outside, and there was the same big round red ball of fire in the night, the black night. And I watched it, a tear rolled down my cheek because I was sad to be back, and I watched the lunar eclipse melt to a crescent of fire in a matter of seconds. So it was a spectacular event that the crescent, or that the round ball of fire had melted to a crescent of fire in a matter of seconds. I believe, must have been, yeah. We're not going to get into which way it was facing, because I said I didn't know. I don't remember which way it was facing. Because what way it is facing matters, right? And now we're going to have to get into a controversy about which way it was facing and what that means and all of this stuff. I probably was facing backwards. I used to say it probably was facing forwards. I mean, just when I say used to, I mean used to recently. So I don't know what difference it makes. It means that people can interpret it whatever way they want to. The Muslims are going to interpret it for them, and the Catholics are going to say, what the? But we were hit by Muslims down the road. So I don't know what to tell you about that. I thought it had something to do with the Ark of the Covenant, but then again, the Muslims and the Catholics both honor Mary, so maybe it does. Maybe it has a few symbols, significant symbols associated with it. At any rate, so I discovered more recently that the church was in eclipse around John Paul II's time, and that John Paul II was born and died on an eclipse. The office of the Pope is a placeholder for Christ. And that is pertinent to my next um, revelation, private revelation, where I had been traveling toward the Pope, the papal office that is, represented by a book at the night sky which replaced the moon. It was all white, a white lit up book, a book that was all white and lit up white with gold lettering. And as I traveled towards that book, dread fear came over me, and the power of the dread fear in my soul was able to turn the vehicle around, even though I was only on the passenger side. And so the office of the Pope repelled me in the dream, and as we scurried the wheel around to travel the opposite direction, away from the Pope, and in casual conversation, my soul was pulled out of my body and out of my dream into hellfire. Now, prior to my soul being taken out of body toward the lunar eclipse, and 7 months later falling into hellfire, I had written the Pope. And I believe it happened that I wrote the Pope prior to my soul being pulled out of body. Not sure. But the reason I think that I had written the Pope prior to the time that my soul was pulled out of body toward the lunar eclipse is because I don't recall having reported this event to the Pope at the time. I would have thought that had that happened, I would have reported it to the Pope. He's far enough away that it wasn't going to affect my personal life. So I don't think I would have kept that a secret from the Pope. And I don't remember reporting that. So that's why I think that being pulled out of body toward the lunar eclipse happened immediately after I wrote to the Pope. It was a really long letter and basically wasn't saying anything, This is, I don't know. I was just talking just to hear myself talk. So I wrote him, and then these supernatural events started happening. I'm pretty sure that's a sequence. It's possible that I wrote him somewhere in between two supernatural events, but I'm not sure. At any rate, yeah. So it's said of John Paul II that he was born and died on an eclipse, and that around this time it is said the church is eclipsed. And when I had paid homage to the office of the Pope shortly after, I was repelled by that office and I landed in hellfire. What's confusing for that end is that the office of the Pope remained suspended in the night sky. I mean, as far as I understand it, how would I know for sure? I mean, the office of the Pope repelled my soul, and as I understood it, it remained suspended in the night sky. It was kind of, it was the judge of my soul, and so it repelled me, and I traveled away from it because I was terrified of it, and it wasn't like I really had a choice to turn away from it. The dread fear had a power in and of itself to turn me away from it. So it was like I was repelled. It was almost as if the placeholder for Christ turned me away. It repelled me. And I, like two like poles of a magnet that came together, I was repelled, and I was compelled to drive the opposite direction. When I was traveling in the opposite direction, it seems like, I had more control over the situation, which I did not. And I was pulled into hellfire. I dropped out of my body, dropped out of my dream into hellfire, which was very, very real. So going soul out of body the first time through the outer space took 10 minutes, thereabouts. And then dropping into hellfire only took a matter of seconds. And even though I was being pulled further and further into the flames, engulfed in flames, deeper and deeper into the unending pit, I was rescued in a matter of seconds. So anywhere from 5 to 20 seconds, and that nightmare of hellfire was over. Well, in the metaphysical sense, it was over. Because I was absolutely terrified, probably for the rest of my life. And I had to cope with this somehow. I was absolutely terrified. So I eventually had to stop trying to be, had to stop trying to be a tyrant God's idea of perfect. And I found myself a boyfriend. I allowed myself to be human. I found myself a boyfriend. I parented a child. I raised her alone because the relationship with the boyfriend wasn't a healthy relationship. But it did provide a certain amount of healing, and then it was time to move on. Because it couldn't be for keeps. It was not a healthy situation, so I parented my child alone. And so yeah, I allowed for a certain amount of consolation. Where else was I going with that? I don't remember, but so 12 years after being rescued from the hellfire, and I had slept with the lights on in my bedroom for the next 3.5 or more years, 3.5 to 4 years, before I found a boyfriend. Okay. My daughter, and I parented a child, so my daughter's 7 years old. So that's 12 years after being rescued from the hellfire. Altogether, that's 12 years after being rescued from the hellfire, that my daughter was 7 years old. She was 7 and, yeah, not 7.5, she was 7. That the Blessed Mother of Jesus Christ, our Lord, appeared to me. And anyways, yeah, she woke me to look at another spectacle in the night sky, which was the sign of the risen Lord in the form of an illuminated cross of clouds. And I'm assuming they're clouds because they're painted. It was like a painting in the night sky. So they were clouds. Streams of clouds that were illuminated by the moon. So they were, it